Hi and welcome to the Fancy Comma YouTube. Today I'm joined by Mia Sievers, who is a PhD student studying microbiology at Harvard and an elected town meeting member in Brookline, Massachusetts, one of the cities I spent a lot of time in as an undergrad. Mia originally got interested in science policy when she realized her undergraduate research studying antibiotic resistance in bacteria was limited, without effective communication and policy changes around the topic. Now, alongside her PhD research on Salmonella, she is president of Harvard Student Science Policy Group, and she has acquired a special interest in local politics. When she graduates next year, she hopes to transition into a career in science policy while continuing her civic work as a town meeting member. Welcome, Mia. So what motivated you to run for town meeting in Brookline, a town of 63,000 people, as a grad student?
Thanks for having me, by the way. Uh, I kind of got into local politics. Originally, I got into politics because I was living in the DC area and I was following national level politics, which was happening all around me there. And then when I moved to Boston, to Brookline to start my PhD, there's not as much of an environment of talking about politics around here, but I was still very interested in it. So I was following national level politics. And then also I was kind of noticing this environment of local politics kind of unfolding around me in Brookline. So when local elections come up in Brookline, at least, you start receiving all these like mailers with people advertising the election and asking for your vote for all different positions in the town government. And I was receiving these mailers after I arrived, and then I decided to go vote in the local election, which happens in a separate election from the like national level elections. And what was really awesome about going and voting in this local election is that the people who are running for office in your town, they're right there, and there's a limited number of people that are going to come and vote. If they want to, they can stand outside of the polling place a certain distance away for legal reasons and talk to voters who are coming in to vote on election day. And what really struck me was walking into the polling place and talking to all these people who are really excited about running for local office in Brookline, running for various positions, and were really, really motivated to make the town a better place and really wanted to hear what I had to say as well as a voter. Just like, oh, I'd love to get your vote, and also what's important to you. What can I do if I do get elected to make this place a better place to live for you? And the turnout in local elections tends to be pretty small. So also going in and talking to these people, and then like the decisions you make about who to vote for, these local elections can be decided by just a few votes. And it really struck me how this was a way that I was making an impact just by voting. And then these people here were really trying to better their community and better my life. And they don't even really know me just because they care. Based on that, I started following the local politics in Brookline and getting more interested in that. And then at some point, maybe late last year or early this year, the thought kind of popped into my head that I could be one of those people who's trying to make the town a better place by working in the town government and standing outside the polling place and talking to voters. That's kind of how I decided to run and how I ended up in a position like I'm in now. But before that, I was just interested in it, and I was following the issues that are happening in Brookline, which I ended up finding very interesting. The way the government kind of works in Brookline is the executive branch is a select board of 5 elected members that meet pretty regularly throughout the year. And then the legislative branch that votes on the laws that are passed in Brookline is called town meeting. That's a pretty large body of 255 people, and then there's some at-large members, including the select board and some other people. Brookline is divided into 17 precincts or kind of districts just based on location. So each precinct has 15 town meeting members. and 5 seats are generally up for re-election each year. The polling places are decided based on your precinct. So, especially as a town meeting member, there's one place where everybody in your precinct is going to be going to vote if they're voting on election day. So, if you stand outside of that place, you can directly talk to people in your precinct who are just walking by you on their way to the polls. Originally, I was involved because I was just one of those people that would walk by on election day, and there would be people standing there who are running for town meeting or who wanted to advocate for people they know or people they really support who are running for like the school board or the select board or something. You can talk to those people and they'll talk about themselves as a candidate or the candidates that they support and what they believe themselves or these candidates can achieve, and you can talk about what you care about as a voter and if they are going to achieve these goals. If you were to vote for them, what can they do? And you can just have this conversation directly with this person who might end up being your representative. I really enjoyed that direct connection with the people who are running for office, because when you're voting in a presidential election, there's no time that I'm going to meet Kamala Harris or Donald Trump or somebody. It's just not going to happen, especially I live in Massachusetts and it's not some kind of battleground state. They're not focusing a ton of effort here. So at the local level, it's right there and you can talk to these people and they want to talk to you. And it's very easy. As it gets to be a larger election, a more national stage, then you're less likely to directly meet the people that you're voting for, you know?
So you're saying you're going to go vote. You're not part of any group or anything, but you're at your precinct and there might be an actual candidate at the precinct location and you can actually engage them in a conversation about the issues like while you're voting. Is it at the polling place? Does that be a certain distance away from the polling place?
It has to be a certain distance away from the polling place. I forget what the exact distance is, but there's some regulation around that. On election day, there's usually a sign that distance away from the door to the polling place at each polling place. And then the elected officials or people who are like advocating for them will set up kind of just beyond that sign, the sign that indicates how far away you have to be. And you can hang up posters. What a lot of people do is hand out flyers with your name on it or the names of what the group you're representing, who they endorse. If you're a voter, you walk by, you get handed all these flyers, you have some conversations with people, maybe you find some people compelling and you're like, okay, well, that person I'd really like to vote for. I think they'll do a good job. And you have a flyer from, there are different political organizations in Brookline that advocate for specific issues. An organization that helped me get elected is called Brookline for Everyone, and they're very pro-housing, pro-transit. They want to make it more affordable and easier for people to live there. So they helped a lot with my campaign. And then they also will endorse a list of candidates from each precinct. So you can walk into your polling place with your little list from like Brookline for Everyone. And it has, these are the 5 people Brookline for Everyone thinks you should vote for. And you can take that into consideration when you walk in. Because you're getting all this material and you're talking to all these people directly as you walk in.
I've created some of those for my friends and family before, like a guide of who to vote for here in Oklahoma. We're similar to you in that we are as red as Massachusetts is blue. So as a Democrat, it was so amazing for me to be in Massachusetts. But okay, going back to my question, you're really smart. You're a scientist. You're studying your PhD. What lessons did you learn for your own campaign from talking to these local candidates? Did you learn anything from them that you applied to your own winning campaign?
That's a good question. I think actually what really stood out for me from these conversations I had when I was a voter before I ran for anything was just like people who were just really like friendly and easy to talk to. It made a big difference to me that I just felt like this was kind of an accessible person. And the fact that they were even there, that they were taking the time to stand at the voting location, they wanted to hear what I had to say. I think that made a huge impact on me. And then that was something that when I decided to run, that's something that I wanted to carry forward. It was really important to me to talk to people when I decided to run, I was thinking that I could be a voice representing other young people and grad students living in Brookline. And I want it to be a situation where I can talk to these other young people and they feel comfortable telling me what they want Brookline to be doing and where they would like things to go. I think people being smart about how they vote on things, and then also people just like caring about their voters, their constituents. It really mattered to me when I was a voter. The other thing that really mattered to me was like, I really like what Brookline for Everyone stands for. So the people that they endorse, I'm probably going to vote for as well.
What is Brookline for Everyone? If you don't mind explaining in a nutshell for our viewers.
In Brookline, there are certain political organizations that advocate for specific issues. So, Brookline for Everyone was formed with the idea that Brookline is getting pretty expensive. I mean, in all of Massachusetts, there's a housing crisis. There's just not enough housing for the number of people who live here, and it's very difficult to find a place to rent. It's harder to find a place to buy. And Brookline for Everyone's really committed to getting more housing and more accessible, affordable housing in Brookline, and to make it more of a place where more people are able to live, and it's also easier to get to, more transit friendly, which are all things that kind of resonate with me, I think, especially as a young person.
It's the main thing I've noticed. People that the issues that people care about, they want to elect people that care about those issues. Sometimes they will just neglect other issues and just like if there's an issue they really care about, they'll vote for the person that truly gets it on that issue. The other thing is listening to voters and really talking to voters is really important in any political campaign. We talked to Kristen Hook, who ran for Congress and got like a something percent of the vote against an incumbent. One thing she did is she went door to door and knocked doors and talked to people. She was pretty exhausted by the end of it. The great thing about politics is that you don't have to have a background in politics. You just have to really care about the issues and care about the people that live in your local community. That's exactly what you did, and that's how you became elected to town meeting in Brookline, which I gather is similar to city council in other places. What is your position now in town meeting, and how did you get into it? How long was the campaign? Is it like you run against someone for that specific seat, or do they just pick like 5 people and then whoever gets the most votes? How does it work in Brookline town meeting?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like I said, town meeting is Brookline's legislative body, a pretty big elected body. Brookline is divided into 17 precincts or districts just based on location, and each precinct has 15 elected members at town meeting. 5 seats turnover each year become available for re-election or new election. On the ballot, it will list anyone who is signed up to run for town meeting in your precinct. So you can vote for up to 5 people. So when I ran in the spring this year, there were 7 people running for the 5 seats in my precinct. There were going to be 5 people elected. There were going to be 2 people not elected. So it was a contested race, but I wasn't directly battling it out with anybody for 1 seat. And in fact, it's pretty common in Brookline for people who are campaigning for town meeting to work together with other people in their precinct and run maybe as a slate or as partners. So I had another woman in my precinct who was also running for town meeting for the first time this year in May. Her name's Yukiko. And she and I were just put in contact through kind of mutual friends, other people who were her pro housing in Brookline. We hit it off and we felt like we had a lot of the same goals in why we were running. But we also felt like we're kind of at different points in our lives. So we could kind of illuminate different issues for each other and then also kind of help each other's campaign, because Yukiko is a homeowner and she has 2 grown children, and she's been living in Brookline for a long time. And she knows a lot of people who live in our precinct just from the time that she spent here and from her kids going through the schools in Brookline. Whereas I'm younger, I'm a renter, a grad student, so I have a different perspective based on my experience not being in Brookline as long, but knowing kind of what the rental market is like now and knowing a lot of other young people who live in Brookline. So we worked together on our campaign, and we canvassed together. We made up flyers that we sent out in the mail and that we handed out together that had both of our names and faces and bios on them. And it was really, really wonderful working with her. That was very collaborative. And in the end, we both got elected, along with the 3 incumbents that were running in my precinct as well.
That's really cool that you and Yukiko ran as a team. Maybe I missed the part where you said how you met her. How did you meet her, and did you bond over your shared political views, your shared vision for Brookline, or both, or something else?
We were put in contact by mutual friends that are kind of politically active in Brookline. There are a lot of current town meeting members, especially in my precinct, that knew Yukiko because she'd been living in the precinct for a long time and were just like already friends with her. My contacts at Brookline for Everyone were really helpful with putting me in contact with people in my precinct, current town meeting members, and other people that might help with my campaign as soon as I started campaigning and decided to run. So I was kind of getting set up, meeting a lot of people. And then the people that I was meeting, a lot of them were like, oh, I think you'd really like Yukiko. I think you and she are really striving for similar things. You've decided to run for similar reasons. I got put in contact with her through these kind of mutual contacts. When we did meet, we decided that we did have similar views and that we could help each other's campaigns. So that's how we started working together, which I think was also just a really great opportunity. It was really cool meeting everybody that I was put in contact with, and it was also cool spending time with Yukiko and talking about her experience living in the same neighborhood where I live, but for a longer period of time, raising her kids there, and kind of her perspective on the town's issues and how she kind of arrived at similar like political conclusions to mine, but just kind of coming from a different place.
That's nice that you plugged in with the local infrastructure of the town meeting with people that had been in office, it sounds like, because as a newcomer, you have to have some insider knowledge of how it works. I feel like it's almost not possible without that knowledge, unless you are one of those people that becomes known just for being a political outsider, in which case you create your own sort of politics. But I feel like that's rare. Being a town elected official is one of those thankless jobs that you really have to like public service to get into. So how did you first become interested in local government and public service?
I decided to run because I had been interested from voting in the local elections and just kind of following the issues. And I I felt like the issues were very interesting. I also thought that it was something that I probably just would enjoy. I talked to my partner when I decided to run. I was like, I've had the craziest idea. What if I just run for town meeting? Is that too much? Is that insane? And he was like, well, I don't know if it's crazy, but I think it's something that you'd really love, and if it's something you want to go for, like I support you and you should go for it. And I think he had the right take on me because I do really love the issues. I love talking to people. I loved meeting people in my precinct, and now that I've gone to my first town meeting. It happened just a few weeks after the election. I really did enjoy the issues that we talked about and voting on those issues and really considering what's happening in the town.
What kinds of things have you voted on at your first meeting? Anything that people outside of Brookline might find interesting?
Yeah, so we had a pretty long discussion at this first town meeting of mine about whether to privatize trash collection in Brookline. So just like whether the local DPW should continue picking up trash throughout the town or if we should outsource that to a private company. It was a pretty sticky issue, I think, by the time we got into it in May, because the DPW had been having consistent issues over the past few years with staffing and staff, like recruiting staff and retaining staff for garbage collection in the town. And it was becoming a huge burden on the DPW to continue maintaining trash pickup. So they were really hoping that we could outsource the trash collection, but there was some questions in the town government of whether the town had really exercised all the resources at its disposal to keep trash collection in-house and like improve these staffing morale issues that we were having. Of course, the problem with outsourcing trash collection to a private company is then we have to pay the private company. It's going to be a more expensive thing in the long run. So it would be nice to keep it in-house if we can. And also, once we outsource this, it would be very difficult to get trash collection back in-house, because once we outsource the trash collection, we'd probably be selling off our garbage trucks and doing away with the contracts that we had in place to keep that running. I think a lot of town meeting would have liked to try and keep trash collection in-house and see if we could remedy some of these staffing issues that we were having. But the contracts were set to turn over at the end of June, I think it was. So by the time we were discussing this at the end of May, that gave only a month for us to decide whether to have the DPW work out a new contract or if we should go forward with the private company contract that the select board had been negotiating pending town meeting approval. We ended up deciding to privatize the trash collection and outsource it just because it would have been a really last minute change of course. It was a really interesting discussion that we ended up talking about for a long time, and a lot of people were really conflicted about trying to figure out what would be best for the town in the long run, if this was something that we could maintain, because the director of our DPW, she's very competent, she's wonderful, and she didn't feel like it was something that the DPW could keep doing. But it was a really hard issue to vote on, but we did end up deciding to outsource the trash collection so the DPW doesn't feel as burdened about that. That was basically one night's discussion. Our meeting in May lasted, I think it was 4 nights, and each night was 4 hours. We just meet for as long as we need to get through all the issues that we have listed out to vote on. So that was one conversation, but there were a lot of interesting discussions. There was a lot of exciting stuff happening. And a lot of it is very, it's just local issues. It's what's happening in the community, but it is going to impact what's happening in the town in the future. This privatization of the trash collection, that's more that we're going to be paying for trash collection, which is less money in the town budget going forward to pay for other things, the schools or anything else.
So there's this nationwide, I don't know if it's nationwide, but I think there's a couple of cities, maybe Boston was one of them. I know Philadelphia had a, what's it called when you stop working
The
and you don't,
strike of
the
the
strike, yeah.
Republic, the company.
Yeah, they had a strike, and so that affected the trash pickup services. There,
That's happened since we voted on this at town meeting. That's not actually the private company that we use for our main trash collection in the town. There are some businesses in Brookline that do use Republic for their trash collection, so they were having issues based on the strike. The conversation in town meeting after the fact is kind of like, oh, would we have voted on this if we knew that these workers from this other company were going to go on strike? I don't think that whether the workers are going to go on strike really plays a role in like this decision, because any workers could be in a union, could end up going on strike. I don't think that that's like a particular issue just to this company, especially because the company that we use is not the same company.
I mean, it sounds like your city workers were overworked and you needed something to, well, that's why you get paid the big bucks. Well, do you get paid as a town meeting member?
No, I don't.
I could try to make this decision myself, and I don't think I would do a good job. I would probably have a mental breakdown if I tried to decide the trash of the city all entirely by myself. But
I think that's what's kind of nice about the structure of town meeting is we really took the time to talk the issue through. So it has a format where like people who were in favor of privatizing trash collection could go and talk about how we should privatize trash collection. People who were opposed to that could go and talk about how we shouldn't. Each side could kind of give their perspective, present some information. People did a pretty good job doing their research and kind of drawing up statistics about what we can expect the budget situation to look like if we outsource the trash collection versus if we keep it in-house, what sort of measures we might be able to employ that might help with some of the staffing issues that the DPW was having with the sanitation workers. Each side could kind of present their argument, and then also there's an opportunity for town meeting members to just ask questions about anything they have questions about. A director of the DPW or members of the DPW can answer the questions so that we can try and make an informed decision. It's a massive body of people who are making this decision. It's not just me deciding on my own. All 260 of us sit there and think through the arguments that we're hearing, and we have the opportunity to ask questions if we don't understand what's going on or if we're having trouble making this decision, and then we all together make the decision. Sometimes it's nearly unanimous, and sometimes it ends up being a lot more split how town meeting feels about it. But I think it's a cool initial way to get into politics, to just be part of this governing body and feel like everybody is in it together. We're all making this decision together, and we all just want what's best for the town. So we're going to come to something based on that, and we have good intentions at heart. And the issues end up being really big. It's hard to understand them fully, but I guess the best we can do is our best. And I think we're doing a good job. I think we're making good decisions.
How does your training as a scientist influence how you approach policymaking or community issues?
The issues that we consider in town meeting and the way that the process kind of works, it ends up being a lot of information to process, because what happens is before town meeting, people can submit proposals for bylaws that can be implemented in Brookline, and then the proposals get put together, and then people can like read through the proposals and be like, well, this proposal isn't as I would write it. I think it should be amended in this way. The warrant, it's called, this like big book of proposed laws and regulations for Brookline, goes through this whole process of submitted like language and then amendments and all this. And then a few weeks before town meeting, at least if you're a first-time town meeting member, they mail it to you. So I got this thing in the mail. It was like this thick of papers, like a giant book, like 8.5 by 11 papers, this thick. That was just tons and tons of information on all 30 or so warrant articles that we were going to be voting on in the upcoming town meeting. And it's a little overwhelming. It's like, how am I going to get through all of this? How am I going to understand these issues that I'm going to have to vote on? And I feel like that's where my scientific training kind of came in handy, because I think I face a similar thing in lab when I'm trying to understand the system that I'm working on. It's a similar issue of, well, what have people researched before? What literature is out there? Sometimes there's so much information out there, and I have to parse through it and understand what's important and what might be relevant to the system that I'm working on. And then I have to integrate that into a course of action. And I felt like the process of reading through the warrant for town meeting and kind of understanding the information and getting to the heart of it, figuring out how I wanted to vote, was kind of a similar process of just information processing, which I think my PhD work has really equipped me for.
That's what I was just talking to some people about a conversation I had with someone I interviewed on the Fancy Comma YouTube. I can't remember her name right now, but I'll link it here when I do the editing. We were talking about how there's so few scientists in local government. I had that conversation again with someone else yesterday, and they were like, yeah, not local government, just in government, local government, That's a great place for scientists to get involved because there's a lot of need for local government. It's not as glitzy and glamorous being in city council as being a fancy senator or being the president or even being in Congress, but that doesn't mean there's not a need for people in local government. But a lot of times the people that gravitate to government are people that have a government background, political science background, history background. I think it would be great if we got more people into government, like people watching the Fancy Commas videos on science policy and talking to you, which, if I'm not mistaken, you're our first sitting elected official that we have interviewed ever. Let's get more scientists involved in public policy. What advice would you give to other scientists or students who want to engage in their communities or local governments?
I think the advice that I would give is that you can engage in your local government. I think that a lot of people, especially PhD students, you feel like you're too busy, or maybe you're only going to be here for a short period of time. You'll be here for 5 or 6 years while I do my PhD, and then who knows where I'll live after this. It's maybe I shouldn't make a long-term investment in this place where I'm living. But I think it's really important for us all to be involved in our local government if we want to, even if there isn't a body like town meeting that's easy to run for. I think that most cities and towns have councils or departments that have ways of getting involved, or you can just kind of follow the local issues and maybe advocate for the candidates that you support. Getting involved in local government, you have such a larger impact on the people around you. When you're involved in national politics, it's such a slow steering ship. You're not going to turn it that quickly. So you can work a lot and things will maybe start to turn a little bit, but it's a long process and it takes a long time to turn it one direction or another. You can work on that, but if you're at the local level, like I said with my election, there weren't that many people that even voted. I think there are like 40,000 registered voters in Brookline, and 10% of them voted in this local elections. Even just voting in your local elections makes a huge difference because a lot of these elections are decided by just a few votes. Also, it's important in a town or city government to have the voices of everybody who lives there. In the case of Brookline, the town consists of about 53% renters just by population, which is a very large number of renters in the town. But the town government is 80 something percent homeowners. The town government isn't able to take into consideration the voices of renters as strongly just because there aren't as many renter voices in the government as are actually in the town. It's not the same proportion. So it's important in Brookline to get more renters and young people into the government so that we can have those voices so we can make more informed decisions. And I think in any place, there's a similar thing where the people that feel like they can't be involved for whatever reason are not getting involved, and then they're underrepresented in the town government. These are all important voices that the town or the city needs to understand what it can do for its residents and how best to move forward. Long story short, I'd say go for it. I think people should be voting in their local elections and like getting involved. If you're interested at all, go for it. Look into what your town or your city has to offer and start diving in. I think also for my run for town meeting, there was a lot I didn't really understand about the town government of Brookline or how town meeting worked before I ran. And it was okay because I had the opportunity to, I kind of dove right in and threw my hat in the ring, and I was like, okay, I'm going to run for this. And then I was like, I have to understand it now. So I talked to a lot of people that are current town meeting members and a lot of people that are involved in the government of Brookline. And I learned so much. It was okay that I didn't have previous political experience, and it was okay that I didn't understand everything about Brookline town government before I started my campaign, because I've learned a lot. I feel like I understand a lot more, and it means a lot to me to be able to represent the other renters and young people and grad students in Brookline.
How do your peers in science react when they find out you're a local elected official and serve in the town government?
Actually, my peers have been really supportive. I kind of thought people would think I'm a little nuts or something. We're all really busy, and I wasn't sure if people would kind of feel like it was irresponsible of me to be taking this time away from my science. But everyone I've talked to has been really, really wonderfully supportive and excited for me. A lot of my peers are really interested in what I'm doing. The conversation that we're having today about how Brookline town government works and how I got involved, I've had this kind of a similar conversation a lot with a lot of other grad students who work on my floor and a lot of other scientists who work around me. People are kind of interested. It's a little bit of a different thing that I'm doing. And I think they're also excited. And I think there is some feeling, especially like at Harvard right now. Harvard's had a lot of conflict recently with the federal government, and there's a lot of concern around cuts to science funding, and we've been having a lot of funding difficulties. And I think a lot of scientists around me have been feeling kind of demoralized with the state of federal level politics and just feeling like there's nothing that they can do. It's been really wonderful for me to have my Brookline town politics and my town meeting membership as something that I feel like I can have an impact on and something that's important to me. And then I think it's also been kind of heartening to my peers in science to hear when they're feeling kind of stressed out about federal politics, to hear about my stories about the ways that I'm trying to have an impact right here, right nearby, and to feel like there are good things happening. There is good political change happening at the local level all the time. I'm hopeful that I can encourage some of my peers to get more involved in the cities and the towns that they live in. They don't all live in Brookline, but I would love if we saw more people involved in local government in their communities.
There's a saying, it's been attributed to Tip O'Neill. He was an elected official in Massachusetts. I don't know if he really said it, but it is all politics is local. And it's just this idea that every single political issue starts locally. It has a local impact on people. Even national issues are just super hyper local, like what you just mentioned about Harvard being affected by the federal cuts. Those have local implications. And starting locally, like grassroots local involvement is just unmatched in terms of getting things done, making an impact. Local is where it's at. And I wish that more people adopted that mindset, because we tend to take our local government for granted a lot, or even worse, we don't participate in it, and then we're confused as to why our local government's one way, our federal government's another way, and we're just complaining when we should be being part of our local government, even just voting, doing our civic duty. Would you ever consider running for higher office or working at the intersection of science and public policy more formally?
Um, I don't see myself necessarily running for higher office. This is kind of my first foray into any kind of like political position. And a lot of people do ask me, like, oh, well, then are you planning on working your way up? Is Massachusetts state legislature next? Or I just got elected in May. I've had one town meeting that I did really enjoy. I guess I wouldn't completely rule it out, but what I'm really interested in for my career and my future right now, I'm looking at probably finishing my PhD next year. I'd really like to work at the intersection of science and policy. I think my dream would be advising policymakers on science related policy, being able to talk about science while also influencing policy decisions a little bit, and also kind of being in the room where these decisions are made. I don't yet know where my career will take me. Right now, I'm basically a full time scientist with some science policy dabbling and some local government dabbling on the sides. And I feel like a lot could change after I finish my PhD next year and I'm not a full time scientist. I'm kind of open to anything.
Have you personally been affected by the budget cuts from the federal government at Harvard, or
I have been. I was a NSF GRFP recipient. I had a nice fellowship from the NSF that was canceled with the budget cuts to Harvard. My lab has lost a lot of its funding because of the budget cuts, which has been very, very stressful to all of us. It's not a super conducive environment to keep working on science. What's happening in my lab, and I think other labs, is just with concerns about funding, a lot of people are kind of hoping to just like wrap up their projects and move on. Part of the reason why I have a more concrete schedule for when I'd like to graduate is because I know that there are these funding restrictions in my lab. I'm not sure what the financial situation is going to look like going forward. There's a lot of uncertainty. It's been pretty stressful.
I said this in our last video when I talked to a fired Fed at the NIH, and now I'll say again that that's heartbreaking that the government took away your NSF GRFP, because I was GRFP honorable mention and I never got like money for it. Luckily, I had a training grant from our program. Man, that's tough. I'm really sorry to hear that, but good thing you're almost done.
Harvard's trying to support the labs through it and trying to keep things running. It's been a rocky few months, and a lot of labs and a lot of departments have had to tighten their belts. I mean, I'm still getting paid and I'm still able to do my lab work. I think there's just a lot of concern going forward about what it will look like. But again, it's been really nice to be involved in something that feels very positive, which is the Brookline town meeting. That's been new and exciting for me through the spring as a lot of these funding cuts were happening and a lot of concerns about our future were happening. It's been an emotional few months.
Yeah, that sounds really hard. I used to work at Harvard Medical School affiliated institution, and I can't imagine them having their grants taken away, but I think they are having some of their grants taken away, though I haven't talked to them. But that's so tough because Harvard is one of the best places for research. And of course, as an MIT alum, I know that Harvard and MIT do a lot of collaborations. And so MIT is likely losing a lot of research funding as well, which those are two of the best schools in the whole US and world. I hate to see that happening. But scientists are we persevere, we're creative, we're clever.
Even at Harvard, there's like the Harvard affiliated labs, and then there are like hospital affiliated labs. And the Harvard affiliated labs, like my lab, are very heavily impacted by these funding cuts. And then a lot of the hospital affiliated labs are a little more protected. So then it's just any individual you talk to, you don't know how much they're impacted by this or what they're dealing with in terms of the grants that have been canceled. It feels like there's some that are surprising or are not really what you would expect. And I think it's just based on like the wording of the grant, that some grants got canceled that maybe were targeted even though they weren't supposed to be. But anyway, I think everybody's feeling uncertain about it in the scientific community and a little stressed.
If they literally took your GRFP, in case people don't know what that is, it's the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship Program that's given to basically the cream of the crop of people from the National Science Foundation, so that they don't have to worry about their finances as they're doing their work. They can just have this grant. When you apply for the GRFP, as I did, you send them a description of your research and what you're going to do. And you also have this part about like the broader impacts of it, like how is it going to help the community, like local outreach programs and stuff like that. They get a ton of applications. They only give out a select number of those every year, and it's incredibly selective. And the fact that the NSF put all this time into selecting the NSF GRFP kid and then have them taken away it's kind of shocking. And a lot of people do not come from backgrounds where they can just find an extra. I did the math and it was like $200,000 over the course of my whole scientific career. You can't find money like that. Like once you lose that, like it's pretty hard to replace it. So then everyone that is doing research there, not just science research, but also the other types of research that Harvard has, humanities, they're liberal arts, they're Ivy League, so a lot of that kind of stuff.
At Harvard, at least in my program, students are pretty well protected, and I think that's true across a lot of scientific programs at the university. So um, I'm guaranteed funding for 5 or 6 years of my program. My GRFP was taken away, but the funding still has to come through. Even if something happens in your lab and your PI realizes that they can't pay you, then the program has something in place to help with paying your students, because when they take you on, they're making a commitment to pay you and like make sure that you have an environment and an income that allows you to continue to do research throughout the time of your PhD. So I've lost my grant, but I'm still getting paid. I don't know exactly where the money is coming from right now. I think a lot of things are shifting around because my lab has lost a lot of funding, so it can't really pick up the slack on my grant. There's been so much funding that's been cut that I think Harvard can only hope to cover like a percentage of how much was taken away from the labs. Most labs have been kind of warned that they might have to downsize, or they might have to expect to be spending less on their research endeavors going forward just because the funding is slim. And for my department, I'm in the microbiology department. I know that the funding that goes to the departments has gotten a lot smaller. There's a lot less money. So then that looks like the department used to have just events that allowed people to like socialize and talk, and it's really nice to make those connections, social connections, so then you know the other people that are in your department. If you need a reagent that you ran out of and you really need it today but you don't have time to order it, you can be like, oh well, there's this other lab that I met at this social event a few weeks ago, like maybe they would have this reagent, or just other people to talk to about scientific endeavors. But the microbiology departments had to cut down a lot on the social events that were a big reason why I decided to join this department, because I felt like that was such an important part of the community. But there just isn't the funding.
There's no more free food anymore. That is,
There's
wow.
like it's limited, and it's like also for like the department seminars, we used to you could get like like a muffin with your seminar that happens every
Yeah, you
and
go sit down and you get some food. That was the whole bread and butter of my grad student existence, literally,
yeah, it's
sometimes if I
I
had
feel
bread and
like
butter.
it's so important for like drawing people to the talks and making it enticing and making it a better discussion. The free food is like gone away. In the spring they had to cancel seminars that happen. We have invited outside speakers who will come from like other universities and talk about their science, which is really, really, really helpful for kind of understanding what's going on in the larger science sphere. You kind of understand where the field is going based on them. But in the spring, the microbiology department had to cancel the invited speaker seminars because it costs a lot to pay for these people to fly in and give seminars. And then they were going to have it canceled just indefinitely. And they're going to be able to continue doing the seminars again starting in the fall because they received an anonymous donation who from I don't know who. uh,
Someone very concerned about science at Harvard, it sounds like.
Yeah, so there's been some funding that was just donated that is going to allow us to continue having those seminars, which is really nice. I'm really really happy about that. But it's kind of a lot that we've been having to scramble to just continue our kind of day-to-day activities and day-to-day science. I think science can be hard enough without having to worry about these larger concerns and where your funding is going to be coming from.
Scientists don't think of their work as being affected by politics and policy. It was pretty common for me, even when I was working at a Harvard affiliated university, for us to just be sitting and chilling and eating our lunch and complaining about politics. And and I mean, we did have some really deep conversations. Like we're talking about the primaries. It was before 2008's presidential election, and everyone was talking about a young guy that was really promising from Illinois named Barack Obama, and he was the presidential candidate. And literally, my colleagues were like, you have to vote for Obama. He's a really good candidate. They actually did convince me to vote for Obama. He's a Harvard grad himself of Harvard Law School. I would say a pretty smart guy. He loved science. He visited MIT. He started the Brain Initiative. My lab mates did informally lobby me to vote a certain way, but I feel like that's the extent to which people usually talk about politics. Like, I worked on political campaigns, but many people did not, and I was kind of like the odd one out. But that's what we need more of, is scientists making these decisions. Like, if we had a Congress that had more scientists, they probably wouldn't vote to defund science. And we'll see what they're going to do with the upcoming budget appropriations for the next year. For now, it seems like scientists kind of have to live with the consequences of the 2024 election. I'm trying to find the silver linings. One silver lining to me is that many scientists now know how the government funds our research, because many people didn't know it's federally funded, but it's like, sometimes you just got to do stuff despite all the challenges. What impact do you hope to make through both your science and your public service?
Overall, just through my career, I've just been hoping to have a positive impact on other people in some way, which I think feels kind of vague, but I think that's kind of how I got where I'm at. I went into science because I felt like it was something I was pretty good at, and I also thought that it was something that I could make a difference. I could do good research and then hopefully prevent the spread of antibiotic resistant bacteria. And then, like I think we mentioned earlier, I was doing this research at the bench. And I was like, okay, well, actually, if we understand better how the antibiotic resistance is spread in bacteria, we don't that doesn't necessarily stop us from spreading it. It's the policies that go into this and the communication with people who make decisions about when antibiotics are used or any regulations around that process. Like that's going to be really important. And that's kind of how I initially got into science communication and science policy, because I'm kind of trying to use the skills that I have to make things better. And I think there are a lot of people out there, there are a lot of scientists out there that feel similarly. They're just trying to make things better in whatever way they can. And that's definitely the goal that I'm trying to achieve with my science, with my talking about my science, with my public service. It's partially something I'm interested in, but it's also about people in my communities and having a positive impact on them.
Well, thank you for taking the time to speak with me. I know as an elected official, you're quite busy. You mentioned 4-hour meetings 4 days in a row. That's like 16 hours of city council meetings. That's a lot of time, but it's time well spent to serve the people of Brookline. So thank you for your service to the people of Brookline, and thanks for helping understand Salmonella better despite everything that's happening at Harvard. If you watch the interview I did with the fired Fed, Stephanie Morrison, she actually talks about her idea that after a while, after this era of government and its science policy, there's might be a period of rebuilding our science policy infrastructure, and so people will be needed to come back and rebuild that. That was in the federal level in HHS. She was doing science communications. Hopefully, it won't get to a point where we have to, as scientists, rebuild our science policy infrastructure. Hopefully, the people that make decisions will listen to scientists who are actually quite mobilized right now. Like, the Stand Up for Science people are basically talking about this like every single day. The important thing is to make the most of it and persevere and see if there's any opportunities for like learning or growth. You are clearly engaged and in tune with the issues, and I can't think of anyone that could be a better elected official than someone like that. Congrats on everything you've accomplished, and hopefully I can visit Brookline again and get some bagels, because I miss their bagels so much.
Yeah, let me know if you visit.
I will let you know. I may come up and visit Boston. I haven't been in a while.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for your time.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much.